Good morning once again. So we're going to carry over from where we left off last time. I think when we were doing our class last time, we looked at um, JavaScript operators. Those are the comparison operators, the arithmetic operators, the logical operators, and even the string operators. Uh, and we also looked at how we can work with functions. And I think we also discussed things to do with data types. And specifically, we were referring to the primitive data types, that is number, boolean, string, and of course, null and undefined. So I think that formed our agenda for last time. So today I want us to discuss another, and I think also discuss functions and how we can declare functions either as an expression or as a declaration. So yeah, with those in mind, I want us to look at something else today, and this is going to be about something called control structures. So, what are control structures? In any programming language, programs usually execute from top to bottom. So, as you write your code, the program executes from top and it goes all the way to the bottom. But that is not sometimes how we want the program to operate. Sometimes we want it to do other things other than just executing from top to bottom, and that introduces us to what we call control structures. Now, there are several control structures in programming. There are four in general, though, of course, the linear is not considered a control structure because that is how a program is designed to operate. So the linear side of things is not going to be considered a control structure because that is how the program is going to operate. So we're going to discuss the other three control structures. So control structures by definition, so I'll just write it here, are basically code blocks that alter normal program flow. So these are the code blocks or statements that alter or change normal program flow. Okay. Yeah. So we have three main types of control structures. The first one is what we refer to as selection. We have a selection control structure, and in selection, this one executes rather code based on some condition. So if I want to execute code based on some condition, I will use this particular control structure. So one of the applications of control structure is what we call if statement. So we have an if statement. So an if statement will allow us to execute code based on some conditions. So let me jump back to the code window and let's see how this works out in JavaScript. Say, for example, I want to say hi to somebody if they are, say, a man. I want to say hi if they're a man or if they're a boy. Okay. So what you could do here is I'll come back to my code editor. I'll put them side by side. Let me open my browser, open my code editor, put them side by side like that. Perfect. So here I'll create a new file and I will call it if.html. Then I'll close this window so that I'm only left with the code window. So put Control plus plus to make the code window slightly bigger so that I can be able to see what we are typing. Yeah. So let's say, for example, I have my document here, and inside the document here, I want to put this is a if statement. If statement like that. Well, maybe I can reduce the code slightly. Yeah, I think that's better. So with this if statement, I want to be able to, well, maybe I can start by going live. This is now a plain window like that. So let's say, for example, I want to put some text on the browser here to tell you good morning if it is before um, uh, 8 a.m. If it is before noon, otherwise I don't tell you anything. So the statement here, I would put something like paragraph, show me a greeting. Okay. Well, I can actually make it a heading 5, make it a little bigger. Show me a greeting. So a greeting will be shown on the window here. Again, I can make this one a little bit bigger, like that. So show me a greeting. So I'll show you a greeting here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to write a script. Then I'm going to declare a variable here. Let maybe say time is equals to, I'll probably say this is 10 a.m. Okay. Then I can check, I want to display something on the window if based on the time. So I'll simply say if, then I'll open bracket because that's the syntax for writing if. Then I'll put my condition here. Time is less than or equal to noon. If time is less than or equal to noon, then I can simply say document.write good morning. Good morning. Morning, like that. So you can see I've written here good morning, but simply because time is less than 12. What would happen if I put 13? If I put 13, then you see there is nothing that shows on the screen. So this particular portion of code over here will only execute if this condition is met. And that's why we're talking about selection. It will only execute a given code segment if some certain conditions are met. Now, this one can be written on one line like this, but I like writing it elegantly like that in 2 lines. Then I take this thing and put it on the inside like that. So if this condition is true, then anything inside this curly braces is going to execute. Other if it's just going to be one statement, you can write it as I had written it, which is basically on one simple line. So again, you can see there's nothing that shows over here simply because the time is greater than 12. And this condition says that only when the time is less than or equal to 12, then execute this code block. So if I turn back to something like 10, it will show me the good morning. If I put something like 8 a.m., it still show me good morning and so forth and so forth. So that's the if statement. Then we have if, then else. So there's the if part here, which executes. Then there's an else part down here, which I can go ahead and say, if this condition is true, execute this. Otherwise, execute something else. That is, if you have an alternative condition that you want to respond to. So here I could say, now if it's not morning, then definitely it is afternoon. So I can simply say document.write good afternoon, like that. So depending on what time of the day it is, if I say here something like 3 p.m., which is 15, that should tell me good afternoon, as you can see over here. Otherwise, if it is 8 a.m. in the morning, I'll be able to see good morning over here. So that is if, then, else statement. Now, there is also if, then, else if, then statement. So there is if, then, else if statement, something of the sort. So you'll have if, then, else if, else if, else if, and so forth and so forth. A classic scenario here is, let's say we want to do a grading system. So we have some sort of marks, and we are saying if you score below 50, that's a fail. Between 50 and 60, that's a C. 60 and 70, that is a B. 70 and 80, that is an A. Well, uh, C, D, there's D, E. Yeah, okay. So we can say less than 50, below 50 is a fail. To 60 is a pass. Up to 70 is good. Above 70, excellent. So if I give you these conditions, I'm saying any mark below 0 to 50 would be a fail. Anything between 51 and 60 would be a pass. Anything between 61 and 70 would be good. And anything above 70 would be excellent. So how do I write that? So very simple. What I'll simply do here, I'll come and declare a variable here. Let score is equals to, I can give it a value, say something like 64, right? If I give the score as 64, then I want to output the grade that the student score. So what I'll do here, I'll say if, then I'll put my condition. I'll say score is less than, greater than 0, and that's how you write and. Remember the comparison operator, not comparison, but yeah, the logic operator, logical and. So if the grade is greater than 0 and the score, rather, not grade, but the score, and the score is less than or equal to 50. So this is going to be one condition because the two things have to be met. This condition must be true, and this other condition must also return true for this to be able to work. Otherwise, if either of them is false, then this condition will break. Okay, so if the score is greater than 0 and the score is less than or equal to 50, then I can simply say, I can declare here grade is equal, well, I can declare it without giving it a value. So you usually just put a comma if they're going to be the same. If you're going to define them the same, that is either you want to use let or const. Remember, let allows you to reassign value, but not to declare the variable. It does not support hoisting, and const on the other hand does not let you declare the variable. It does not support hoisting, and at the same time, it does not allow you to declare the variable or change its value. So again, when you're defining your variables, just keep those things in mind. Okay, so the condition here we are saying we have defined grade and score, and we want to check if the score is greater than 0 and the score is less than or equal to 50, then the grade will definitely be a fail. So I'll simply say here grade is equals, forget about my integers, is equals to fail. So that will be a fail, and I can come down here and I can simply say document dot write, and I can say the score of, then I'll put my score here, is graded as, again this is a string, has a grade of, rather, then I'll put now my grade. So, well, you can see the grade will have nothing, but of course I know this one is also going to be a problem because I want to, let me use pluses instead of the strings like that, so it is a bit easier for it to understand it. So you can see why string operators work. So again, I'm saying this should be document, actually document. So yeah, you can see good morning. The score of 64 has a grade of undefined, which means we have declared this variable, but we have not assigned any value to it because this portion will not assign it a value so long as it is not greater than 0 and it is less than 50. Since here it is 64, that won't work out. So I can come here and say else, then I can put another if statement over here, then I can put my other code block down there. So here I want to check that score is less than or equal to 51 and score is less than, is greater than another or equal to 51, but it is less than 60. If it is less than 60, then I can simply do my grade here and I say this is D, right? So D should be inside here. So you can see that's the second condition. Then I can go ahead and say else if, and then again put another condition and I'll say if the score is greater than or equal to 61 and the score is less than or equal to 70. This was score. So if this is the case, so this is fail, this is pass, then the other one would be good. So this one, the grade would be good, good. So Otherwise, the grade would be excellent. So you can see now I have an if condition, else if condition, else if condition. If either of these three conditions are not met, then this last condition is going to be executed. And this is what we refer to as if then else if statement. So there can be if and a lot of other ifs following it up. You can see all these ifs are at a particular level. Okay, so that is how if then else if works. So you can check for different grades. Maybe for example, I can have the students here score maybe say 30. I expect that one to be a fail. As you can see, the score of 30 has a grade of fail. If this person for some reason scored something like say 65, 65 should be good. And you can see that is actually good. If they were to score something like 48, that will still be a fail, but 59 rather, would be pass. As you can see, that is actually a pass. So this is how if then else if statements work. Okay. Now there's also what we call nested ifs. So in terms of these control structures, we have what we call nested ifs. Nested if is where I have an if statement if inside another if statement. Let's say, for example, we have gender and we want to be able to address these genders differently depending on their age. So, for example, if you're a girl, then we check if you are less than the age of 13. Otherwise, we give another condition. So there will be that if inside another if statement. So that is also actually allowed. And when you're writing programs, you realize that that is exactly how we construct these kinds of statements. So let's say we have gender here, and I'll begin by giving it a female. Then I'll have here age, and I'll say this is maybe say 12. Then here I'll simply say um, uh, if gender is equals to male. Remember comparison operator, double equal to sign. We're using it to compare if the values are equals. Okay. So if gender is equals to male, I can go ahead and check if age is less than or equal to 12. Then the condition here will be document dot write. Then I'll put something like um there. Then I'll put the gender there. Is, then I'll put, these are commas, but you can use pluses. The gender is, the gender is gender, and a teen, preteen rather. This one is preteen. So if the girl if the gender is going to be male, and okay, if the gender is going to be male and the age, and again here we check again if the age is greater than 12, then so actually let's say put female here. If the gender is female and the age is less than 12, then we'll simply say the gender is female and this is a preteen, because you can see the age is 12 and we say this is if it is less than or equal to 12. So we'll first of all check the first condition, then we check the other condition on the inside. So otherwise here, I can simply say that this is a teenager. Sorry. Teenager. Like that. So you can see that I'll just make this one a bit bigger so that you can be able to see the whole code. Yeah, something like that. So you can see again, I'm saying that if the gender is female, then I check if the age is less than 12. Otherwise, I can come here and say, now that they are male, I can simply say document the trait, and I simply say all boys are men. So it doesn't matter the age. So if you are a female and 12, then there's a condition here that's going to be executed. Female, then it will check this condition on the inside here. 12, it will execute what is inside here, and so forth and so forth. Otherwise, if you're not female and you're male, let's just see that like male. So here you'll see all boys are men. So in short, it means that this statement here is what is going to execute. Okay, so I can have this at the top here so that we don't confuse things. So that is how you use if, then, else if statement, and how you can also use nested if statements. Now, this is a very powerful construct because most of the programs we write are based on conditions. So these conditions mostly will be some certain criteria that we're evaluating. If a value is greater than another one, it is equal, it is less than, and all sorts of comparisons that we can be able to do. Then we can execute, we can tell the program to do something. That is generally how the constructs work. All right. So that is one of the implementations of selection as far as JavaScript is concerned. The other selection is what we call the switch statement. So the switch statement, unlike if, it will test one condition for multiple values. Let me say, for example, I'll ask you what the temperature is. Or maybe I would ask you what your age is. So if your age is a certain value, then I'll do something very specific. So I'm basically going to be checking one condition for multiple values. That is how switch works out. Okay, let me give you a classic scenario of how a switch works. For example, let's say we want to be able to, determine uh, your eligibility based on where you come from. So if you come from Nairobi, maybe you're going to say you're going to earn 10,000. If you're coming from Mombasa, you will earn 6,000. If you're coming from Northeastern, you will get 2,000, and so forth and so forth. So in short, you're trying to say we're going to give you transport to come over to a function in Mombasa, and depending on where you're coming from, will determine how much fare we will give you in between. So Wajir being the farthest, you will earn the most. Turkana, slightly lower than Wajir. Somewhere in Kitale, much less than Wajir, but also less than Kitale, but of course more than Nairobi. So let's see how that works out. So let's say you are asked which city do you come from, then based on the city that you come from will determine how much fare you should be given. So the case study here is based on your town, fare will be provided appropriately, like that. So, um, let's first of all start by um, I can declare a city, then I can give it Nairobi for starters. Then we want to determine how much fare you should be given as far as your city is concerned. So I'll simply use switch here. So I'll say switch. Now switch only has an expression inside the bracket. So the expression here will be city. Okay. And of course, I'll enclose everything in close brackets. Then I'll start putting my conditions down here. So I'll simply say case. Then I'll say Nairobi, for example. So case Nairobi, then I'll simply say if this is Nairobi, then I can declare fare here. I give it a default value of 0 so that it doesn't change anything. So I'll simply say here fare is equals 3,000. Then of course you have to break. Then you have to also put another condition. Mombasa, full color. Then I'll say fare is maybe say 5,000. It should be fair. I should break. Why is this fair now looking okay? It's not looking good. I don't know why. Probably the intelligence is breaking up. It should be blue. Then let's say about northeastern, then Turkana. Let's start with Kitale. Kitale. Um, this is equal to not full column. That's why it was messing up here. Sorry about that. Case it if it is Kitale, then we'll simply say fare would be um, 6,500. It's numbers actually. Then we put a break here. Then we'll say case if you're coming from Turkana, then the fare would be 10,000 or 9,000, 8,500. So lastly, if you come from Marsabit, of course, every time you have to you have to specify a case value you have to break, because then if you don't break, it's going to execute the next piece of code. Break means exit the loop altogether. So case Wajia, then maybe say here I can give you 10,000. So fare is equals to 10,000. Now, if you're not coming Wajia, if you're not coming from any of these towns, maybe the fare is going to be 1,000. So if you're not coming from any of these towns, that's where we usually have the default. The default will be it's neither of the values that have been specified up here. It is neither Nairobi, nor Mombasa, nor Kitale, nor Turkana, nor Wajir. It is just something else. So if it is any other town, I'll simply say fare is 1,000. So these are the towns that have special conditions. So the fare is 1,000. Then of course I'll break. So this is how, well, you don't need to put the semicolons. They are not a must. I don't like writing my JavaScript with semicolon. Some people like it with semicolon, but that's the structure. Switch, then you put your condition inside a bracket, then you just test for different values altogether. So I can come down here and I can say your city. I can simply say document.write and your city. Actually, let me introduce something called template strings. JavaScript has template strings, so instead of doing all these things with pluses and commas and all that, simply put the backtick, two of them like that, then put your statement inside here. So you can say your city is, now every time you want to insert a variable, you use a dollar sign and curly brackets like that. Then you put your variable inside here, which is city, and you can see it becomes a little bit cleaner. Your fare is, then I'll put like that, then I'll put fare. So if I did that, you can see your city is Nairobi and your fare is 3,000. Let's change this into something else like Kitale. So I should here see here your city is Kitale and it is 6,500. Excellent. Let's say you're talking about, maybe say you're coming from Githurai. So if your city is Thika, you can see here your city is thicker and the fare is 1,000. So again, this code segments, this code blocks inside here, I've only used send a variable inside here, but of course I can put as complex a task as possible. It does not necessarily mean that I have to, use very simple statements like this, but I just wanted to outline that the difference between an if statement and a switch statement is that an if statement can evaluate very complex conditions. As you can see inside here, you can even have 10 conditions inside here, so long as all of them return true, that or false, or otherwise, if you'd like to be able to execute the alternative for that particular statement. So that is the difference between if and switch. Switch, you test one value for multiple conditions. Rather, if you can have as multiple conditions as possible, so long as your conditions are all returning true or false, depending on what you want to evaluate. All right. So that's the second implementation. Now, the third implementation of selection, a control structure in JavaScript, is something called the ternary operator. Ternary operator. So ternary allows you to be able to um, execute one condition, or to execute something if a value is true, otherwise something else. And let me show you how this works out. So let me say I have two conditions, gender or gender that is either male or female. So if you're male, the entry requirement is 18. If you're female, the entry requirement is 21, for example. So if I was to use a ternary operator to achieve that, I would simply write it like this. So ternary operator, ternary operator. So for ternary operator, the scenario here is males qualify when they are 18 or 21. Ladies qualify if 18 and above. So how do I write that? Very simple. So the syntax for scenario operator is condition, then condition, then I'll put a question mark, value if true, then full colon, value if false. So this is how it works out. So let me say here I have let criteria, then I want to assign the criteria a value. So I will simply say, then I can have here, before I have the criteria, let me put here gender. I don't know if I did declare the gender up here. There, yeah, I already declared gender, so that will not work out. So let me just say sex to mean gender, and I'll give sex a value of male to start with. So here I'll simply say the criteria for qualification is if the gender, so I'll put my condition is equals to male. So this here is the condition. Okay. So criteria equals if gender is male, then I'll put the following words: 21 years and above. Otherwise, if they are a lady, I'll simply say here 18 years and above. So then I can come here and output now the value. So you can see this is the first portion here is the condition, which means if sex is male, then if that is the case, then this is what is going to be assigned to criteria. Otherwise, if this condition is not true, then this value here is going to be assigned to criteria. So the criteria will have a value of either 21 and above or 18 and above, depending on what the sex is. So I can come down here and I say document dot write. I'll use a template string because they're easier. You your gender is, then I'll put there sex and qualification criteria is, then I'll put my criteria. So let's see how it works out. So you can see your gender is male and your qualification criteria is 21 years old. So that's perfect. So if I change this one to female, then you'll see now the criteria will change. Your gender is female and your qualification is 18 years old. So ternary operator is also a code block that you can be able to use to execute selection statement. So those are the three implementations of selection statement. And that summarizes my presentation on the selection control structure and how they are implemented in JavaScript. So we have if statement, if else statement, if else if statement, and also nested ifs, depending on what you want to implement. Then you have switch, as we said, only allows you to check for one variable. You want to check it for multiple values. Then of course we have ternary, which would execute a code block, but if a portion of your condition is true, otherwise it will execute something else. It has to have those three parts as a ternary operator. Otherwise, if you want to use if you want to evaluate only a single operator, then you use an if statement. There will be no else part of it. It will only be the if part. So that is selection. Now, the second control structure we have in JavaScript is what we call flow control. Flow control, or what we call repetition or iteration. Repetition means you are going to repeat some code segment a number of times, and iteration also mean exactly the same thing. So these are what we are referring to as flow controls. We want to control the flow of this program depending on some of uh, the conditions of on repetition and iteration. Actually, even selection is flow control So control structures are also called flow controls. Flow controls, they are called flow controls or control structures. All right, so repetition. Repetition is where you want to execute a code segment a given number of times. So let me say, for example, I want to populate a drop-down list from the year 2000 to date. Well, remember, if I was to put a select statement, then that would be very, very chaotic, right? So I'll show us how to generate these numbers. Then probably I'll show us how to use like something like array control and how we can be able to use some of these things to be able to populate data in them. So I'll create a new file here and I'll call it, I will call it not if, but rather I will call it um, iteration or repetition.html, like that. So again, I'll discard this, then I'll come to my repetition file and go live so that now it displays over here. Let's say I wanted to generate numbers from 1 to 50. So I'll just close this window over here so that it's not disturbing us. So emit, then I'll simply say here repetition. So repetition. So the scenario here is generate numbers from 1 to 50 and display below. Then I can put a break here like that. So what that means is I should be able to, well, I'll refresh this. I'll generate numbers from 1 to 50 and then that should be able to be displayed right below. So maybe what I could do is just integrate this one into a paragraph so that it has a line at the start and at the finish. You won't notice any difference. It's going to look almost the same, but of course now we're using different things. So how do you generate numbers from 1 to 50? So I'll write my script here and we're going to use JavaScript to achieve the same. So we can use what we call one of the repetition flow structures in JavaScript is what we're referring to as a for loop. A for loop. So using a for loop, I can tell JavaScript how to generate those numbers from 1 to 50, for example. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do, I could declare variables. So I can simply say let my results, and I'll begin by them being blank. Then I can come and say for let I is equals to 1 full semicolon. So the first one is initiating the value of your counter. So I'm initiating my counter. In this case, my counter is I. Then the next thing is the test condition. So what am I testing the variable to be? So I'll say so long as I is less than or equal to 50 because I want to generate numbers from 1 to 50. Then another semicolon. Then now the third part is the increment. So the increment is how you want to increment the number. You might want to increment by 1, by 2, by 5. It will depend on how you want to increment. In my case, I want to increment by 1, so I'll say I plus plus, which means I increment I by 1. So I'm simply saying from I is equals to 1, so long as I is less than or equal to 50 and incremented by 1, then I want you to execute the following code block. So execute whatever is inside there. So what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to say results plus equals to I. Well, that is a very bad idea because this most likely what this would do is it, yeah, this is a string, so most likely it would add a comma. Then once it's done, it can add a comma so that this becomes actually a string. So it will take whatever result has, it will put I to it. So since result is blank, is going to put 1, then it's going to put after 1, it's going to put a comma. Then it goes back, checks if I is less than 50, it is, it has been incremented by 1, now it is 2. So it will say 1, comma 2, and then it will repeat on like that until it is done. So once it's done, I can output the results down here. So I can say document dot write the numbers are The numbers that have been generated are, then I'll put my results like that. So if I do that, you'll see I now have my numbers from 1 all the way to 50, right? That's awesome. Let me make it 10. Let me make it 15 so that they are few enough to be able to be seen on the screen. So 1 to 15, that is a lot, 1 to 15. So you can see now I have 1 all the way up to 15, and I'm able to achieve that using a for loop. So the condition here is for, which is the keyword, open normal brackets. Start by initiating your counter, which is I. In this case, I'm initializing it to 1. Then give it the test condition. So here I'm simply checking if I is less than or equal to 15. Then give it an increment. So if I wanted it to be incremented by 2, I'll simply say I plus equals 2. So that should increment it by 2. Okay, I is equals to I plus 2. Well, I don't know if that's going to work out. I don't use a for loop for this, so usually plus or minus will just work over here. Something of sorry, I missed. Yeah, that should be okay. Let me try I plus equals 2. So you can see now I'm starting at 1, 3, 5. Or the so in short, I'm skipping 2 numbers. If I wanted to skip 5 numbers, I'll skip 5 numbers, and you can see now I have 1, 6, and 11. So if I say here to 100, so you can see these are the numbers from 1 to 100, and I'm going to skip 5 every other time. Isn't that cool? So that is how you use a for loop. Then it's also possible. The other implementation of iteration inside JavaScript is what we call a do loop. So it's called sorry, not do, but a while loop. We also have a while loop. So this is A. Then you have B here, which is a while loop. So in a while loop, we're going to simply execute this code until a certain condition has been met. So we can still rewrite the same instructions that we had written up here with a while loop. So I can declare here, let new results equals blank. Then I can simply say while, actually it is, yeah, while. Then I'll give my condition over there. Then I'll do whatever is inside this bracket. So what I can do here is I'll say let I is equals to 1, and then here I'll say while I is less than or equal to 50. Of course, I'll execute whatever is inside this code, but I'll need to make sure that I simply say I increment I. Otherwise, if I don't increment I, this is going to be an endless loop because I will always be 1, and 1 will always be less than 50 if I don't increment it for one reason or another. So it will, if I don't increment here, this code segment here will execute indefinitely. Okay, and we don't want to have that. We call that an infinite loop. In programming, we want to avoid infinite loops as much as we possibly can. So let's just put our new numbers here. So I'll simply say new results. Then I'll assign them to the result, the I, and a comma next to it. Then I can go ahead and I will put the value here. I can simply say document dot write. Then I'll say loop achieved um, uh, document.write temporary string values generated in a while loop are, then I'll output my I like that. So if I did that, you'll see numbers. I should have seen my, or it's not I, but definitely new results. Remember that I, yeah, it will still work out, but I will just be a specific value. So I think it's kind of like, where is it? Oh, it should be new results. Do we have it here? Um, I is equals to 1. Sorry. So that was the problem. Again, you can see 1, 2, 3. Okay, I can go on and on up to 50. Why are they not giving me commas? I should have put plus here. So that, yeah. So now you can see numbers generated in a while loop are as follows. So here I could have just put a break. So you can see values generated with a while loop are as follows. So we have output those values over here. So again, while loop, so it will execute while this condition is true. So you can write a for loop or you can write a while loop, whatever is going to be easier for you to be able to understand. So all of them are going to repeat this code segment inside here for a given number of times. Now they're different because a for loop will allow you to have will have a different structure as you can see over here. A while loop on the other one will also have a different structure as you can see down here. So the way they're constructed is a bit different. Then we have something we call the third implementation of course, there are more than this. We're going to discuss others when you're looking at object data types. So don't worry about that. I'm only going using this one because we're using them with primitive data, right? So the third one is a do while loop. So see here is do while a do while loop. So what is a do while loop and what's a while loop? Now, a while loop might not execute. So you can see here I'm generating numbers from 1 to 50. And what if I started with I is equals to 51? So if I is 51, you can see values generated using the while loop are none. There is no value, right? Because by the time I'm starting here, this condition will have been assigned a value. So the likelihood that I might not execute anything inside here is very, very highly likely, of course, depending on how I initialize my variable. So if I initialize it at 50, it will work one time. So you can see it's 50 because it will be 50, and so long as I is less than or equal to 50, then it's going to execute this code. So this code inside here is going to be executed if and only if if and only if um, um, the condition has been met. So that's what a while does. Now, a do while will execute at least one time before it is done. So let me rewrite this one using a do while, then we see the difference. So I'll start here at 51, then I'll still come here and I'll say um, I is equals to 51. I'm still starting with I is equals to 51. I'm just resetting the value. I'm not redeclaring it. Remember this when I use let, I can't redeclare I here like that. That one doesn't work. Otherwise, if we're using var, then I would have been able to redeclare this value here, and that will just be fine. But that is very bad practice. So just use let, and instead of redeclaring it, just reassign its value down here. Then I'll simply say do. So the code block is going to be here, then I'll put my while condition down here. So the condition is going to be down here. So while I is less than or equal to 50. So I'll simply say this code segment here. And once I'm done, I can copy this code here. And these are going to be, these are going to be, let me call this variable something else. So I'll have here, let do while numbers is equals to blank. So this is going to be do while numbers down here. Do while numbers will be do while numbers plus I. Then I'm going to put do while numbers here. So you can see that this first portion, I was starting at 51. So this code block never executed not one single time because by the time it's starting to execute, this condition must be true. Do, on the other hand, will first of all execute at least once, then it will test for condition. So you can see with the do Well, I have 51, even though 51 is less than or equal to 50. It means this portion of code here has to execute at least one time. All right, and that's the difference between a do while loop and a while loop. A while loop will evaluate and execute strictly on conditions. A do while loop, on the other hand, it will at least execute once before it tests for those conditions. Okay, so these are the other three implementations that we have as far as um, 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 repetition is concerned. Repetition or iteration, or some people even call it looping. So those are the implementation. These are the three implementation. Of course, we have so many of them. We have for each, we have for in, and so forth and so forth. We have dot each. All these things are there. But again, these ones are used for object-based types of data. So probably when you start looking at object data types or civilized data types, then those others will become very handy. But at least for this particular case, these three should be able to suffice. So let's look at the third control structure in most programming languages is what we call branching. Branching. Branching is where we want to take a detour, maybe go to a particular code block and maybe say execute this. We have not been using error handling in our code as yet, but error handling is an example of how branching works. So in the event that you get an error, then you go to the error handler, something as simple as that. So so we can do something like go to. One of the implementation is go to. Though JavaScript does not have go to on its own, but we can use a try catch so that in the event that an error has been detected, then we can go and execute where the error handling has been done. We're going to look at error handling in detail later on, so I'm not going to focus on how that's going to be achieved. But generally, we use what we call a try catch block to be able to achieve that. But we're going to look at that on our last class since we're going to be looking uh, at, uh, at error handling in detail. So that's an example. Then we also have things we call break or continue. So the other one is break. Let me start with break. So what break does, it exits the current loop and executes the next. And it executes the next. So if you have a loop and you want to maybe test for some condition, then break on the current condition, then you can break that and continue with the next portion of your loop. Let me say, for example, I wanted to generate numbers from 1 to 50, but if the number is divisible by 5, I want to skip it, for example, right? So something of the sort. So I just want to execute my loop, but if certain conditions are met, then I want to exit from the loop and go on to execute something that is next. So let me say I want numbers from 1 to 20, but I don't want numbers that can be divided by 3. For example, give me numbers from 1 to 20 so long as they cannot be divided by 3 and not give me a remainder. So I could come here and say, I'll put a for loop for let x is equals to 1, x is less than or equal to 20, and then increment x by 1, something like that. So I want to output the results, so I can simply say none 3 devices are they're blank, so I can use here let like that. And 3 divisors, I'll start with that. So here what I'm going to do is I'll simply check if x modulus 3 is not equal to 0. If you take x and you divide by 3 and you don't get a 0, what do? You break. Okay? Otherwise, and three devices will be on three devices plus or equal to x. Then you attach uh, a comma next to it like that. So what it will do here is starting with 1 all the way up to 20, incrementing by 1, I will check if you take the value of x, which is this case is 1 divided by 3, and the remainder is not 0, then you break. So it means that only three numbers that are not divisible by 3 are the ones that are going to show. So I'll go to 1, 2, skip 3, 4, 5, skip 6, 7, 8, skip 9, 10, 11, skip 12. Then I go on like that until I reach 20. So once I'm done, I can simply come down here and I will now say document dot write numbers not divisible by 3 are, then I can put now my three devices like that. Well, three devices, x minus 3 is equals to 0. That should work. That should actually work. Mm, mhm. Let me just see something here. That should actually work. Mm, Let me see. Let three devices is blank. For x is that. So if x modulus 3 is equals to 0, so that should break. That should break three devices. That should have worked because it just should have just executed. Let me see. I'll mask this. So the output is not there. Oh, there are 1 and 2. Yeah, okay, so 1 and 2 only. Oh, break the loop entirely. Continue will exit the current break and continue. So continue will exit the current loop, then go to the next. So if I is 1, this is not going to be true, so it's going to do this. If I is true, this is not going to be true, so it's going to do this. If I is 3, this portion of code will not execute because if I is 3, continue means exit from the current loop, which is 3, then increment by 1, it goes to 4, then now it starts with 4 again. That's why you're seeing 4 here. Goes to 5, 6, goes to 5. Once it reaches 6 again, 6 will meet this condition, so it will continue on like that until it reaches 20. So, sorry, continue means exit the current loop and continue the next. So this is continue, not break. Then, of course, break will do the exact opposite, which is now allowing you to be able um, uh, to exit the loop entirely. So executes. Sorry about that. Continue, exit the current loop, and continue the next one. That is continue. Otherwise, break, get out of the loop completely. So once, if I want to break out of the loop, once a condition has been met, I simply put a break here. So it means that it's going to execute 1 and 2, so long as it finds something that if you divide by 3 and the answer is 0, now it exits from the entire loop and goes all the way to now the next code that is executed, which is this particular code block over here. So that's the difference between break and continue. So you can see they achieve more or less the same thing. The only difference is one, it allows you to exit the current loop and continue the next loop. The other one exits the entire loop altogether. Then you also have throw. Throw is where we maybe now sometimes want to throw errors. Maybe say I want to write a function that divides two numbers, And I know that if I try to divide a number by a zero, then errors are definitely going to come in. Of course, I can use a try catch to try and trap that, but I want to use throw to show us how we can throw an error instead of just using a try catch. So we have the throw statement, which is also another implementation of branching as far as JavaScript is concerned. So let's say we want to write a function, and I use a um, declaration function over here. So I'll simply say function divide numbers. Or what can I call it? Well, maybe say divisor, something like that. I'll take two numbers A and B, like that. Then now I might want to check for some conditions over here, because this becomes very, very crazy very, very fast if you know what I mean. So what I'm trying to say is, you try to um, um, do this, then it will definitely give you problems, because if you try to divide a number by zero, then definitely you're going to get a very large value. It's not going to be zero, it's going to be a very, very large number that is infinite. So you cannot divide a number by zero. The number becomes way, way too large, okay, as you approach zero. So what I can do here is, because I have A and B, so I can just put a condition here. If maybe B, which is the second number, is equals to zero. If B is zero, what I want to do is, I want to throw an error. And what I'm throwing here is basically just a statement that cannot divide a number by zero. You cannot divide a number by zero. That would definitely not work out. Throw does not have the square brackets like that. It simply is a statement like that. So I don't need the curly brackets. Otherwise, if I needed the curly brackets, I would have put them inside here, like that. Now, this is how I like writing code, like that. Okay. So that is how I like writing my code. Okay, excellent. So we now have this function, and you're saying if b is equals to zero, which means the second number is equals to zero, I'll definitely throw error and tell you, no, you cannot divide a number by zero. Otherwise, I will return. Return is another statement that we use for purposes of, sorry, put it in the wrong place. Should be here. Otherwise, I will return. Return is another a branching structure that we use in JavaScript, because it allows me to return value and stop execution moving forward. So I'll return A divided by B, something like that. So maybe if I open my console window over here, that's my console window. I'll open console here. Let's see what happens. So I have my browser window here. I have my console on the extreme end over here, and I want to be able to test if you divide a number by zero, what would likely happen. So I can call this function. I can say let c is equals to divisor. Then I'll simply say 2 divided by 3. Then I can come here and say document dot write the answer is, then I'll put C up here. Then of course 2 divided by 3 is not a number. That is not true. This is actually a number. A divided by B, yeah, that should definitely be a number, because I'm seeing A is it is 2 comma 3, not 2 divided by 3. Yeah, so you can see it's 2.66. Sorry, I was I was trying to divide it myself. I should have put 2 comma 3, because the first number and the second number. So you can see I don't have any errors on my window. And if I put, so long as here is a number and I put numbers, definitely there's no problem. But what happens if the second number is put as a zero here? So you can see divide by zero. Cannot divide a number by 0. So definitely what I've done is I have thrown this error onto the screen because b is equals to 0 over here. That is kind of like how you work with some of these control structures. So you can see this portion up here, the throw statement, will actually be used to output some errors as far as the program is or your program is concerned. And that's very, very important because at the end of the day, we want to be able to, throw errors to the users, and especially when you are doing things like calculations and they provide wrong values or wrong parameters or things that are out of range and stuff like that, we can actually be able to throw errors on their behalf as far as SIM is concerned. But of course, we don't usually want to throw errors. We usually actually want to catch the errors, then advise the user as appropriate. But this is just a classic example of how you can be able to achieve that. Okay, so I think with that in mind, I will take a short break. And when I come back again, we are going to be looking at now the what we call the object database. We want to look at objects as far as JavaScript is concerned. We look at arrays, we look at objects, we look at object-oriented programming with JavaScript. Then I think with that, if time allows us, we can look at the fetch API. Then we can summarize our syllabus at that point. So I'll give you a break as of now. I'll give you a brief assignment to write for me a function that populates a drop-down list from the from today, and it pushes it 20 years backwards. So just write that piece of code just for purposes of your practice, then see how the output comes. Maybe once we meet again in the next class, I will show us how to achieve the same. So with that, I'll take a break and I'll see you in the next class. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.